So, I mean, I think Carol's been obviously really careful about sort of what we know. It is useful to know that, to Carol's point, even if there is no evidence with respect to violence, I mean, I think I shouldn't say no, if there's insufficient evidence to bring a case beyond a reasonable doubt, there's still plenty of charges, as we saw, that could be brought.
These men were all charged with 10 counts and convicted on all of them. We're focused on seditious conspiracy, as is the Attorney General.
Absolutely. So people should not be thinking if there's no connective tissue or insufficient connective tissue that means that Donald Trump is not going to be charged. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think he is going to be charged. I did want to raise a point of when this is such a great day for democracy, it's really important to remember that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are not going away. The strategy now, as Mary McCord has said repeatedly, is to not be a national organization, to get off the radar screen from the Department of Justice and to go local. And to burrow in. And so it's really important for people to remember it's a really important case. It's a really important set of convictions. Merrick Garland is right to tout it. I mean, I just noticed the array of people that is the very top of the Justice Department who appeared today. And that's signaling how important they think that is. But it's really important to remember these groups are here and they're here to stay. And they actually have a strategy about how to avoid prosecution in the future.
Well, I don't know if it helps them in that endeavor that Trump put them in his campaign ads. I mean, let me show you. I think that may be a wise strategic decision for violent extremist groups. But Donald Trump can't stop talking about them. Let me play this.
And another thing we'll do, and so many people have been asking me about it, if I run and if I win, we will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
And I'm financially supporting people that are incredible. And they were in my office actually 2 days ago. It's very much on my mind. It's a disgrace what they've done to them. What they've done to these people, it's disgraceful.
What they're saying is so sad, what they've done to January 6th. So bad. Patriots. I mean, I hear right here.
Got one right here, President.
You just take care of yourself. Yeah.
I'm good. President Trump.
It's like he's an NBA player, right? Like signing people's arms. There was an insurrectionist who had her backpack that she'd brought into the Capitol. It was from last week.
And again, the myth that the January 6th was not violent. These people had guns. They had lethal weapons. I know sometimes people kind of like pretend that January 6th on Fox and others pretend that it was just a normal day. Some members of Congress that it was a normal day of, touristic activity and people just walking around. Look how proud they were of their Congress. But the truth of the matter is, I think we need to take a step back for a second, because you're right. The focus on the charge belittles what happened in the weeks to the run-up of January 6th. And I think that's what Jack Smith is trying to look at. We can't lose sight of the fact that while violence was the component of January 6th that may lead to a seditious conspiracy, there is now overwhelming evidence that is in the public domain that there was a concerted effort to overturn the election. So even if you stop short on the actual part of the violence of that day for Donald Trump as a charge, you have the recordings in Georgia. You have the fake elector scheme. You have the Eastman memo. You have all of this.
The Raffensperger call.
The Raffensperger call. You have all of this effort in Arizona. It is all coming to the surface of a wider plot to overturn the election. And that's what Jack Smith should be looking at in terms of how did we get to the point of Election Day to the violence of that day. And there's an entire gamut of charges that are at his disposal.
I want to do two things. I want to deepen our understanding of what that looks like. I also want to put a pin in this idea of radicalized Americans, because what Trump is doing exacerbates the problem you articulated. If they're going to ground, I think Trump makes it harder for them, honestly. But he is more aligned with them publicly than he was on January 6th. I mean, someone in the White House made him go out and do a video telling them to go home. He did say, "We love you," but he's now talking about full presidential pardons for anyone that was at January 6th. And his art, this is art behind me. The art behind him is of the insurrection.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, that is all going to be used by Jack Smith. I think I've talked about this, but just I look at that and I'm like seeing an exhibit because, one possible defense for Donald Trump was like, I was surprised and shocked that they did this. I didn't think there'd be violence. I wasn't supporting them. I wanted them to come and peacefully protest. Well, he's embracing now exactly what they did. He sees, there's no denying what happened on January 6th in terms of the violence. And he's saying, that's great. Well, if you're about to be charged with being the head of this, what better way than to say, hey, that's all, it's the perfect insurrection, like the perfect phone call.
These were the perfect people. They were beautiful people. The committee, back to Ian sort of refocusing our conversation, the committee referred 4 crimes. 3 of them involve or sort of intersect with the other charges that we haven't been talking about, obstruction of an official proceeding. As Eamon said, the evidence is so abundant, a non-lawyer like myself could piece together exhibits to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to anyone who, isn't wearing his standing back T-shirt that Donald Trump certainly conspired to obstruct an official proceeding. Do you think after having access to Mike Pence, who the committee did not, that Jack Smith can close that loop?
Look, I hope. That's all I can say. I think we tried our best as a committee to do a presentation through our hearings. And I think
Tim Hafey would say you did. So let me just represent the absent Tim Hafey today, who would say that by encircling the witnesses that didn't cooperate, the committee was able to establish.
Well, I will agree with my former boss that we were able to. But look, we used the president's own words after January 6th in our presentation of evidence during the hearings. We were trying to show some type of intent from the president, since we weren't able to interview him or former Vice President Pence. I also want to talk about the violence we were able to show. That's been a key theme here today, and Attorney General Garland talked about that, the violence on that day. And I think that was one of the main successes of our first primetime hearing, was really bringing America to that day to show them how violent that day was, because that's what all the president's words, all of the lead up to January 6th, that's what it culminated in. And our democracy was holding on by a thread.
Well, and that's what his comments last week seek to continue to whitewash, right? It is an inconvenient truth that the day was so violent and that the injuries that the law enforcement officials suffered are lasting. Carol, I want to give you the last word on this broadening out of what Trump may be facing in terms of exposure or scrutiny, and that is his role in conspiring to obstruct a criminal proceeding. Carol, would you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't hear you. Ask again.
No, just on Eamon sort of broaden this out for us, that we were focused on the violence because of the dramatic convictions of the Proud Boys for seditious conspiracy, but that we've all, you've been a tip of the spear journalistically in terms of reporting out, especially where Pence started to understand that Trump was indeed conspiring to obstruct the official proceeding, and Pence was that linchpin. I mean, what do you make of what is now public 2.5 years after in terms of establishing abundant evidence that Trump could face some exposure there?
Luckily, I'm not in the seat that Jack Smith is in and making a decision, a charging decision, and I do feel lucky for that. But I'll tell you that I have a little bit of a quibble to make, which is I think a lot of the evidence was in the public eye in 2021. Of course, it's built and built and built with additional reporting, but I remember colleagues of mine and books by some of my close friends in the fall of 2021 revealing the Willard efforts, the war room where Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, forgive me, let me retract that. Roger Stone was there, but the war room was being operated by Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, John Eastman. They were all identified as working hard to find new and incredibly bizarre ways, none of them legal, to get state legislatures in swing states to either block the certification of the vote, to claim there was fraud, to create new electors. That this effort at the Willard that began December 18th, an important date from my perspective. December 18th, a group of lawyers move into the Willard to help the Trump campaign figure out how to block the peaceful transfer of power. It included bullying Pence. In that fall of 2021, forgive me, in March of 2021, there was evidence about the fake electors revealed in public information requests, that there had been completely fraudulent separate sets of electors created out of thin air to try to claim that Trump had won in states that Biden had won. The effort by the the effort by Trump to get poor Brad Raffensperger to claim falsely that the election in Georgia was fraudulent was revealed days after that phone call by my colleague Amy Gardner at the Washington Post, who obtained a recording of the call. This is stuff that's been public and available, and yes, it's been built on. But as many of your viewers have asked me, Nicole, what is the accountability for a multi-pronged effort, as Marcus and Andrew have described it, and Eamon too? What is the consequence for trying 4 different, likely illegal ways to overturn an election?